of doctors' strike and its dire consequences, many are appalled at the human toll it might come to before its resolution. Already lives are lost, and this afternoon mental patients from Madare Mental Hospital were reported escaping from the facility. Many in this facility are on treatment and detention for dire mental health conditions brought down by, among other things, the abuse of drugs and alcohol. And today with me is a panel to discuss the problem of alcoholism and its treatment in Kenya. So let me introduce you to my panelists right now. I'll start with my panelist on my right. We have Agre Lianda, who is a case study, who's going to give us an indication of his own story. And right next to him we have Edith Chepkirui. Both of them have traveled from far to be here, so we thank you. Thank you so much for both of you being here and for being bold enough to want to share your stories and probably help a few people out there. Dr. Lois Okello, she is a psychologist, and she's going to give us some expert advice in terms of signs to look out for, etc., and what you can do. And so maybe let me start with Agri. Maybe let me start with you. When did you discover you were afflicted by alcoholism, or did someone else tell you?
Well, maybe I could start by saying that I started drinking or tasting alcohol about 40 years ago, in 1976, after my fourth form. At this time, I got vocational employment at Mumias Sugar Company. And of course, as a young man by then, I was curious enough and started experimenting. So by the time you get to an addiction level, you have started by experimenting, and then eventually it becomes instrumental. So in terms of when you realize, you may realize when you're at what you call rock bottom. But along the way, you are seeing certain things that are negative, but you are in denial.
What was the point that you realized you had a problem?
There are several points at which I realized that there are problem. One, when I was working at Maseno University as a lecturer for 11 years in the teaching economics. In 2001, I was sacked. And I remember for 5 years, tamarking, or what we call tamarking in Kenya, looking for a job. With master's degree in economics, which I got in obtained in 1985 from University of Nairobi. So for 5 years I was tamarking, and of course before that, my marriage had broken.
Okay, because of your drinking?
Because of my drinking, yes, in 1999. So 2 years later on, I was sacked from Maseno University. And for 5 years, I was doing small jobs with the NGOs and CBOs. I remember working even at Osenala in Kisumu. But then eventually I got a job at Kabarak.
Okay.
And you know, Kabarak is founded on education and biblical perspectives.
Right.
So for 5 years, I was a sober guy. And then at one time, I experimented in a party. So I was scared of the soda, I was scared of the whiskey. But I said wine is not a bad idea.
Okay.
So that idea of, it's not a bad idea, mixing wine with a lot of soda, and there was something like memories I made of this.
Okay.
And then that was now, yes.
All right, so for you, I mean, those are big low points in terms of, you know, your marriage breaking down, losing your job.
I also lost my two brothers in 1 year. In 2003, I lost our mom 7 months later on. So, you know, a lot of
grief,
jobless, wifeless, friendless, a lot of lessless. And of course, that time most people don't see this as a big issue. Because even at the university level, there were so many memos, show us why this should happen. I would be interdicted, and then I'm hurt, you know. Inside you're hurting and saying, I wish they knew I had a problem. By that time, you know, you are sacked, and there you are. You are now an outcast in the society. Okay, I'll come back to you to ask at what point you turned around. Yes, what about for you, Edith, your own story?
For me, I'd start by saying I was raised in a Christian family, a very good Christian background. And my parents did work hard and they provided for us. So I started experimenting when I went to the university. I tested alcohol and I loved it. So that began my love affair. But of course I had started with what they would call the wine coolers, which were more fruity. But with the time I realized that it progressed and the frequency also increased. So it went from having a drink once a month to every other weekend. And by the time I was graduating from the university in 2000, I had become a habitual drinker. But over the next 5 years, I just used to work And you know, I went to an American university and I had adapted that culture of this is my life, you can't really tell me what to do. But around 2005, when my parents came and attended my sister's wedding, I had become very dependent. I had actually started showing signs of an alcoholic, because
What kind of signs?
I could not stay a whole 24 hours without drinking. I'd start hiding my drinks. I'd go drink over the lunch breaks. So they ended up asking me to come back to Kenya, and I came back. I thank God I was able to get my undergraduate degrees, but I came back to Kenya and I continued drinking. But around 2007, where I was working, even my boss noticed that I had a problem. So they asked me to check into rehab. That wasn't voluntarily. So, and that is one of the key issues that I always say, if you're going to get any help, you must first admit that you have a problem. So I checked into Asumbi, which was then in Ridgeways. But as soon as I left rehab, I went back to drinking. Because at that point, I still didn't believe that I had a problem. So when I went back to work, my boss realized that I was back, I had relapsed. So I quit my job, stayed home, stayed in the village, got to the point where I was not even drinking changa in the village, you know. So around 2009, you know, you feel so bad. You have an education. Your parents can make a phone call and you can get a job, but they have refused because there's also the family reputation. Yeah, so I have 10 years of which I can't account for anything.
What was the trigger? What is it that you think triggered? You said it started social, and then you just enjoyed the taste.
I just loved alcohol. And that's why up to date I have an MOU with alcohol. It stays where it stays, and I stay here. We don't look for each other.
So no drinking at all?
No.
All right. The same for you?
Yeah.
It's the same for me, because I wanted to say that when I experimented after 5 years of being sober, I started the downward trend. And of course, if you define, you get the definition of an addict is somebody who's enslaved, somebody who has a craving, somebody who is prone, somebody who will keep on repeating in spite of the negative consequences. So all those things were boiling down to my character.
Let's bring in Royce now. And you know, particularly Edith has mentioned something interesting. She liked the taste. And then from there just kind of grew. So some people are concerned, when do you know you're an alcoholic? Some people say, I mean, if I like to drink and maybe on given days I drink heavily on given days, does that make me an alcoholic? At what point is there an issue?
The issue of binge drinking, when you drink heavily. I think in simple terms, to just help understand, is, you know, most people call anyone who drinks an alcoholic, yet that is not the issue. Because when you are an alcoholic, it means then that the mind and the body depends on alcohol. And if you do not take that alcohol, then there are withdrawals. So you have issues with how you function, you have issues of how you think, you have issues of how you relate to others. Then now we are talking about alcoholism, and ideally that time someone needs treatment.
And do alcoholics have addictive personalities?
Not exactly, because like what they're all sharing, it started with just experimenting. It started with, you know, once in a while. It starts with mixing a little bit. But again, I think there are underlying issues that they've all mentioned. You know, there's loss for Lihanda, losses, multiple losses that he was going through. And for Chepkirui, is talking about a Christian home, meaning that there could have been standards that were set, and then freedom comes in when she went to the university. So then there is that curiosity, and so a lot of people, there's not really somebody who has a personality, except that it's important to know that they are, if a parent, if a mother was taking alcohol while pregnant, then children can actually get the alcohol syndrome. So that anytime they taste alcohol, then they would easily become hooked.
Is there one single way of treating alcoholism? I can ask you and then ask Edith and Agri the same question. A single way to treat it?
I do not think, and really it's a multidisciplinary approach. And I like what Chepkirui said. You know, she went into a rehab and then back and relapsed. And that has been a big problem with people who are taken to rehab. So it's a multidisciplinary approach. And for me, I do believe, because most alcohol is not usually the problem. There are issues that make people move into alcohol. And like Lihanda said, you see, they are struggling and people do not understand.
Yeah.
So alcohol becomes the friend. And the friend who does not complain, but a friend when you get hit, you know, it's relaxing until you wake up
and
the
it's not
next
just
morning.
it's not just alcohol. You are because even your friends would be reminding you that you are unkempt.
Yes.
You have not reported on duty. So you're looking for a lower level where people would even appreciate you.
Yeah.
So you move from your level to a level where you are kind of worshipped, where people appreciate you.
Yeah.
And Janet, it's
Yes.
also important to realize that when people begin drinking and they just have behavioral problems, people make fun of it. And they sort of dislike and enjoy, like what he's saying. He's unkempt, and they just want to laugh about it and make fun about
And
it.
it is, yeah.
And they say you have education, yet
Right.
you're
You're an
drinking.
outcast.
I'll ask the two of you. Let me start with you. You're now sitting on the other end. Maybe before I even ask you, very briefly about your road to recovery. What was the turning point for you before Agri goes into his? What was the turning point for you, Edith?
For me, it reached out the day I woke up and I realized that for the period that I was sober, I ended up having a child, and I could not provide for that child, and I wanted to quit drinking, but I couldn't on my own. That was it.
Okay.
And my folks gave me one other chance, and my dad was very clear, we'll give you one more chance, we'll take care of this child, go put your life in order.
And that was it.
And that was it.
How many years have you been sober now?
Since March 17th, 2009. So March
okay.
will be 8 years.
Okay.
Though we live one day at a time.
Sure.
One
We
day
don't
at a
count.
time.
And
Yeah.
for you, what was the turning point?
For me, I remember in 2011, the university management decided that I needed to go for rehabilitation. And for 1 year, I was at home without a salary, and I was going down the road. But eventually, you know, I became what I would call a village roundabout. By 7 in the morning, I would be asleep there, a piki running around me, and then saying, Professor, useless guy. And, you know, at one point, there's a day I remember, not so vividly, but I drank changa, the only commodity that makes you cry as you enjoy. And I had 5 minutes to walk to my house, and I walked for 20 kilometers. 10 hours looking for my house. I walked over 20 kilometers up to past Salga, Nakuru. And when I wake up at 4 in the morning, not really waking up, but asked somebody, he told me, where are you going? I told them, I'm looking for my house. Where? In Ngata. This is, you are headed for Sachangwan. Then, but in the morning I was asking myself, if I'm able to walk 20 kilometers at night and I'm not knocked, and people who take tea are knocked during the day, and that 20 kilometers, there are buses, there are lorries, and so on, I said, God must have a purpose.
So that was the
So
time
at
that
the,
you decided,
at the
okay.
same time, my friends were very supportive, especially the university.
Yeah.
Remember during that time, Professor Nasiuma was the vice chancellor. I had friends like Dr. Sienga, Dr. Mhaji, Dr. Uka, and so on. And business school, where I'm a member, lecturer. So they took the initiative. They talked to somebody, Reverend Trombati, of the high school, Moya School, Kabarak, and he identified the rehab for me.
And you started the treatment.
Urban Recovery Center. So a day was set for me to go there, and I told myself, I'll drink for the last time. And indeed, Mr. Olwach came with his car, and they drove me to the rehab in Eldoret.
All right. Just so that we can, you know, because we're getting ready to wind up. You're now sitting on the other end, where you're probably seeing people or hearing stories about struggles with alcohol. How can someone reach out to that person who is on a downward spiral? Now that you're sitting, if there's someone out there, and I have a friend or a cousin or someone who I feel is really struggling, what can I do as someone concerned? What do you think are the right words or actions to show this person or to get help, or to help them get help?
I think, Janet, one of the most important things, the fact that we are here as a message of hope. There was a time when people in Langata knew that I could never stop drinking. But the fact that over the years I've been able to reorganize my life, go back to school, be a productive member of society, should give others hope. And two is that over the years, alcoholism, you know, it doesn't discriminate. You will find the children of bishops, of politicians. It does not discriminate. So the thing that is so important is that people need to learn alcoholism as a disease. As a disease. And of course there is that stigma that is attached to it, especially for us women. You know, there is that that notion that if you're a woman who is drinking, you're therefore your ways are wayward and all of that. But looking at where I have come from, there is hope. There is hope.
Okay.
And there are many institutions that do offer rehabilitation services. But what has worked for me is having a rehabilitation center that has a very strong spiritual foundation, so that you're not even just addressing the issues of alcohol. What about low self-esteem, pride, lust, all of that, so that it's a wholesome approach as opposed to, yes, so I quit drinking, but what next? What will I do with my life? And when you work the 12 steps of the AA program, one of the steps, step 12, requires that we take this message of hope to others. So, and I believe all the rehabilitation centers in Kenya do follow the 12 steps Alcoholics Anonymous program. I would like to believe, because if you do, you realize that I have the responsibility as somebody who is recovering to help somebody else who is out there. And also it helps me to be accountable. Now that I've been here, what happens if you see me in a bar, Janet, in the evening? Would you ask me, you know,
what's going on?
Yeah, and it also keeps me going. It's also a way of me putting myself in check.
You have to give us your final word, because Agri has to, and of course Lois. Again, the question I went back to, if I am concerned, I'm a sober friend to someone who is on a downward spiral, what can I do to reach out to them? What steps, what words can I say to them that can get them to begin to turn around?
You're not the first to be in that place, and you'll not be the last. There is hope. There is hope.
All right. So they just need to be encouraged.
Yes, that is it.
All right. Thank you so much for your story, Edith, and congratulations, of course, on your milestone. As your final words, and also for you, someone who, if someone is concerned that they have a friend who's on a downward spiral.
Okay, I'll talk briefly about my stay in the rehab, Haven Recovery Center. I was welcomed there by Bishop Rono, who is the founder. And went through the 12 steps recovery program. The first step is I admit my helplessness. And in this state, there's only one power that can be able to bail me out, and that power is higher than me, and that is God. So the belief in God, and the knowing that God is in the driving seat, that has really pushed me moving. Because I got saved in the rehab, and when I got saved, I was reinstated back to Kabrak, and I learned that even the Bible says that the Lord is my shepherd, and that I'll lay a table before you. So for me, I've seen God working a lot of things, doing a lot of things in my life. I've received a lot of support from my colleagues in Kabarak. Kabarak has been very supportive of me, and I've moved out inspiring people that there is hope. In fact, the biggest impediment is denial. Parents are in denial, the alcoholic is in denial, the employers are in denial, the spouse in denial. They are pointing fingers across. I think it is high time. In fact, if we are able to overcome denial, then that is the starting point of understanding that addiction is a disease. People need help, and we move out inspiring, because the more we talk and give hope, the more inspired and the more change. Because if you look at people like Joel Austin, he's saying what? When you're driving, don't look in the side mirror. Look in the front, the windscreen, because where we have come from is the past. Where we are going is important.
Thank you for your story, and once again, of course, applauding you for your sobriety all these years, and wishing you the best. Before we wind up, maybe you'd also be able to best answer what I've asked in terms of trying to reach out, identifying that a friend has an issue, and how best to approach them, because that's usually a bit tricky, and what people can do.
Janet, I think one of the first thing that I would say, it's mostly people think that when someone gets to problem drinking or even alcoholism, they can stop by themselves, and they're usually mocked or sometimes even forced, coerced, and what needs to be known is that someone needs help. And the role of psychologists has not really been embraced. And yet the psychologists are the ones who are able to really look at the underlying issue, because the alcohol is just the symptom, is the problem. And very few people are able to sit, even for an hour or two, with someone to be able to just speak to them, affirm them, appreciate them, and let them know that what they are going through, like Chip Curry said, they are not alone. And then even introducing them to a support group. I think, like what Leander says, friends and people who understand you and make you feel still valuable are very important.
On that note, as we wind up completely, the cost of counseling, the cost of rehabilitation, there's concerns that it's expensive. I don't know whether you can comment on that, and maybe you as well.
I think definitely the cost of rehabilitation is expensive. It is. Except that there are very few centers who are able to take in someone and take them for treatment free. There are very few. But we are talking about 60, 70,000 per month, between 70 to 120 per month. And the first step is usually 3 months. So that's quite expensive. But the preventive, where the role of psychologists, the spiritual leaders come in, is very, very minimal. And that's what we should be able to focus on. Yeah, the awareness and the preventive.
The emphasis on prevention, intervention, so that treatment can be the last resort. Because like for us, God gave us a second chance. Through salvation. But the point is, why don't you make use of your first chance? Because when you're at rock bottom,
then it's very hard to get back up. You wanted to make a final comment?
And then one thing that we have done at the rehabilitation center that we were in is we formed an association of the alumni, because you'll find somebody will do their 90-day program, but what happens? So you've quit drinking. Where's the role of the church and those who have gone down that path? So that is something that now we are doing as alumni of the rehabilitation centers, so that we can encourage the others that once you're done with your 90-day program, then life begins for you.
All right. Thank you all so much for your inspiring stories and inspiring hope. Thank you so much, Royce, for that. We'll be right back on Monday Special. Do stay with us.